Hello, Year 10 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my latest podcast. Today's lesson, we will be taking a closer look at homeostasis. Here we have Homer Simpson. He is mainly concerned with donuts and TV, but his primitive brain includes a thermoregulatory center in the hypothalamus. If Homer does a workout, which is extremely unlikely, his body temperature rises. Thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus detects this and brings about a response. The response shown here is sweating. This helps him to return his temperature to normal. If Homer goes out on a cold day, his core body temperature will drop, and the thermoreceptors in his hypothalamus will detect this. This brings about a nervous response where motor neurons deliver electrical impulses to his muscles, causing him to shiver. This requires energy in the form of ATP, generated through a greater rate of respiration. As you know, respiration generates heat, and this raises his body temperature back to normal. This is just one example of homeostasis. Others include maintaining blood pH, blood glucose, and water balance. I will use text-to-speech for the learning objectives on the next slide.
Learning objectives. Define homeostasis as the control of a constant internal environment of our bodies, including blood sugar and temperature. Outline the control of blood sugar. Explain the process of thermoregulation.
Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment. While the internal environment fluctuates slightly, receptors detect these small changes and send messages to the control center, which in turn sends information to the effectors. That results in a response that returns whatever thing is we're looking at, whether it be blood sugar or temperature, it returns it back to normal. This is an example of negative feedback. Looking specifically at blood glucose, the receptors are the alpha and beta cells in the pancreas. These cells also act as the control centers. When blood glucose is high, such as after a meal, the beta cells detect this and they produce the hormone insulin. The target organs are the liver and muscles. These are the effectors. The response is to take up glucose and convert it into glycogen. When blood sugar is low, maybe because you're running a marathon or you are fasting, the alpha cells act as receptors and control center, and they produce the hormone glucagon. The effectors are again the liver and muscles, and they convert the glycogen back into glucose, which is released into the blood. Of course, when we talk about insulin, we think about diabetes. Diabetes is where homeostasis ceases to function properly, and people cannot control their blood sugar. There are two types. There is type 1, often called early onset diabetes, and this is where a person does not produce insulin and is treated by injecting into muscles insulin. Type 2, also known as late onset diabetes, is where the target cells do not respond to insulin. Clearly, injecting insulin will have little effect, and blood glucose is usually managed through a controlled diet. Type 2 diabetes is often associated with things such as obesity. So now it is time to pause your video, and what I would like you to do is follow the link below this video to what I call a hot potato. This is a closed procedure or missing word exercise. I forgot to put any kind of clock on this, so you have unlimited time. All you have to do is choose from the drop-down list. At the end of it, you can do one of two things. When you've got it fully correct, you can either do a screenshot, print it off and put it into your notebook. Alternatively, you can copy it into your notes. So back to homeostasis, and this time thermoregulation. Our body temperature fluctuates around 36.6 degrees C. For exam purposes, saying 37 degrees C is accurate enough. Clearly, body temperature fluctuates with exercise, external temperatures, or even a woman's monthly cycle, being slightly higher during and after ovulation. However, thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect these changes. The effectors include muscles, where we shiver in the cold, sweat glands, producing sweat when hot, shunt vessels below the surface of skin control the flow of blood towards the surface of the skin, hair erector muscles in the skin. All these help to maintain an almost constant body temperature. So let us take a look at what happens in the skin. So here we have two diagrams of the surface of the skin, just a small section of skin. One of them shows the skin in warm conditions and the other one shows skin in cold conditions. The question is, can you work out which is which? I will tell you that the top diagram is when a person is cold, and the bottom diagram is when someone is too hot. So what happens? Looking at the top diagram, when we are too cold, a number of things happen. One is that there is reduced blood flow to the surface of the skin. There are special blood vessels called shunt vessels, and what they do is they actually bypass the blood vessels that go to the surface of the skin. They dilate, they allow more blood to avoid going to the surface of the skin. Why? Because one of the ways in which your body loses heat is through radiation. And the more blood that flows to the surface of the skin, more heat loss there is due to radiation. The second thing is that there are hair erector muscles. Show one just there. When that contracts, what actually happens is that your hairs sort of rotate around an axis outwards like that, and therefore become erect or upright. Well, why? One of the ways in which your body loses heat is through conduction. By the hairs rising, it traps air between the hairs. And as I'm sure you know, air is a very good insulator, therefore it acts as a layer of insulation. If we look at what happens when we're too hot, obviously the hair erector muscles are relaxed just here, which means that the hairs are lying flat, so they're providing less insulation. But what does happen is two things. One, there is an increase of blood flow to the surface of the skin. That's why your face becomes a little bit reddish when you are hot. This means you can lose more heat as radiated heat. And the other thing that happens, of course, is that your sweat glands begin to release sweat. How does that help? It helps because that sweat evaporates, and water is a very, very good coolant. So it means that heat is lost from the surface of the skin through the heat of evaporation. Your task is one of two things. I will attach these files to Firefly, so you can either print these two diagrams and you can explain in your own words as to what's happening in the two diagrams. Alternatively, those who prefer to draw, you can draw the two diagrams and then explain what is happening in each case, and of course, why. Explain some of the physics involved in heat loss. So body core temperature and hypothermia. You sometimes see these sort of diagrams, sometimes within exams. So on the left-hand side, we have this gentleman here in Astana, 21st of July, nice, warm, hot day maybe even. And you'll notice that pretty much the whole of his body is warm, including his arms and legs. His hands and feet a little bit cooler, but most of him is warm. If we take a look at the same man on 21st of January in Astana, then it's a slightly different story. His arms and legs are much colder. His hands and feet are much, much colder. They're into the blue zone just here. But the important thing just here is when we have a look at this dark area just here. The important thing is that we maintain the temperature of this area of our body. Why is that? Well, the answer should be fairly obvious. These parts of the body contain our vital organs, our brain, our heart, our lungs, and our liver, which of course is very, very important. So these organs have to be kept at around 37 degrees C. Your body basically directs blood away from the extremities because this is where you lose heat. It might even shut off the blood supply to your hands and your feet to such an extent you may even get frostbite. Your body mechanisms will sacrifice a couple of fingers which might get frostbite and eventually have to be removed or maybe eventually drop off in order to save your life. That sounds very drastic, but that is how your body works in extremely cold situations. In the center here, I have several questions. I haven't done it at the point of making this podcast, but what I will do, I will copy and paste these questions into Google Doc. I will share it with you and you can write your answers, insert your answers under each question. It's easier for me to mark if it goes question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. I'm not having to flick between windows to look at what the question was. When you've done that, return to the video. So your final task, I have a second hot potato for you. This time about thermoregulation. This time also I've put a time limit on it. So you're trying to do the task against the clock. If you don't complete it before the clock is finished, quite simply, refresh the page, have a second go until you get them all correct within the time limit. You can then either do a screen capture, print it off, insert it into your books, or you can copy it into your books. I hope all this is fun. I hope it's all helpful. I'm sure that you will give me feedback on Zoom. Stay curious, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.